So it's sort of difficult for me to determine what the purpose of this video is. Maybe I'm just trying to share information here. For any of you that are interested in going down some of these rabbit holes with philosophy, theology, religion, learning about the roots of it all and trying to make sense of it all, right? Trying to see where the science is and a lot of this stuff, why people were so obsessed with some of these ideologies, right? For any of you guys that are curious with this stuff, this video could really be quite fascinating. I've kind of been curious about this stuff for a long time, over 10 years, and it's stuff that you just don't bring up in a conversation, right? All of us know what it's like to have something to explain to somebody and just not enough time to explain it without sounding like a crazy person. So to keep this intro short, I hope some of you guys have the patience and just the interest to watch the majority of this video. Towards the beginning here, the first maybe even 20 minutes or so, I'm going over things that seem pretty basic, they seem like stuff that you probably heard before. But after that, I promise you the climax is later in this video. But it's important to get these first bits out first. I have to explain the basics, if you will, to describe where I'm going with all of this. So, for those that have the patience to listen to it, I think you're really going to enjoy it, especially when we start talking about the stars and I start kind of teaching you guys the night sky. It's pretty neat stuff. And I guess the only disclaimer I have is that this video is not trying to change your perception or change your beliefs on anything having to do with religion, theology, philosophy. Again, I'm just simply sharing information. Now, if this information does change your perspective on some of that stuff, then so be it. But again, don't get mad at me, because this is definitely some stuff that makes you question what you've been taught. This can put a lot of things into question, although it answers many, many questions. And I believe that it'll clarify a lot of this stuff for you guys. It'll clarify the roots of religion, theology, and philosophy all into one nice little package. And you'll never look at this artwork the same. It'll jump right out at you. So let's get started. Now, to begin with all this information, we're going to start with one of these really old atlases, right? These really old maps of the Earth. I believe this one's from the 15 or 1600s. This one's pretty rare and super old, which makes it that much more juicy for this information that I'm about to share with you. So, on this map, I think we're pretty familiar with what some of these lines represent. So the main bold line that's running straight across horizontally is obviously the equator of the Earth, right? You have above that, slightly more faint, written above it, you have the Tropic of Cancer, right? And below that, you've got the Tropic of Capricorn. Now, you have in the middle this sine wave, okay? This sideways S-looking line. That's actually the path that the sun takes throughout the year, the path of the direct sunlight on the face of the Earth as we change our seasons. Now also, which makes this even more interesting, is that a lot of these little pictures, the artwork around the map, these appear to be constellations. So one that really stands out, it's pretty obvious, is Aquarius. This person with this pot of water here, dumping it out, right? And I know that's Aquarius because to the right of that you have what looks like a giant whale, okay? That whale is Cetus, or the sea monster, another constellation. Right here lined up in the middle, when the sun crosses the equator at September 21st, okay, that's the fall equinox. Just below that, as the sun enters Libra, you have Libra. You have Lady Justice. She's got the sword, the book in the other hand, okay? Down here to the bottom right, you've got a lion laying down. Next to him you have a bull, right? That's Leo. The bull represents Taurus. You've got the lamb or ram of Aries as well. Coming up here to the north, you've got Aquila or the eagle. You've got what looks like a fire-breathing dragon. I believe that's meant to be Draco, the dragon constellation that circles the North Pole. Naturally, he would be up at the top of this picture. along with the chariot, right? The charioteer. So, in this big map, you've got clear attention to the path of the sun. You've even got that sun picture right in the middle. And then you've got the constellations surrounding the Earth, all the way back in the 15 and 1600s. So here's an easier way to look at that sine wave pattern, right? When we hit the spring equinox at March 21st, we say that the sun rises in Aries, okay? Then, as we progress throughout the year, when we go through Aries, Taurus, and Gemini, our 3 spring months, the sun rises then at June 21st at the furthest north point compared to the equator. We call that the Tropic of Cancer, right? As the sun enters Cancer, it appears to go sideways for about 3 days, and then it begins its trek back down towards the equator during the 3 months that we call summer, right? Through Cancer, Leo, and Virgo. By the time we get to September 21st, the point back at the autumn equinox, right in the center here, the sun appears to line up in front of the constellation of the Scales, or Libra. September 21st, lining up in Libra, this represents the fall months, okay? So we have Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius as the rulers of the fall months. This is when the days start getting shorter than the nights in the year. So down here at December 21st, the sun lines up, rises at our winter solstice, enters the sign of Capricorn, the goat that's always moving uphill, just as it begins its trek back up towards the equator. By December 24th, December 25th, we actually celebrate the return of that light, or the return of the sun coming back up towards the equator. Now, knowing that the solar year starts at March 21st, if we count March as the first month, and we come all the way over to Libra, when we get to September, okay, the 7th sign, this is why Sept in September means 7, Oct in October means 8, Nov in November means 9, Deci in December is 10, right? March is the first month of the solar year. And from our perspective, this is sort of what it looks like throughout the year, as long as you're in the northern hemisphere, okay? So March 21st and September 21st, the sun lines up directly east when it rises and sets directly in the west, no matter where you are on Earth. Now, if this person is standing at the equator on the December solstice, okay, down at December 21st, the sun's going to appear to rise about 23.5 degrees south of east, and it's going to set at that same degree south of west. Inversely, at the summer solstice, the longer days throughout the year, where there are more hours of sunlight, the sun's going to rise slightly north of east. At the equator, it'll be about 23.5 degrees. The further away you get from the equator, the wider these 3 points are going to separate from one another. So if you go to places that are pretty far north or south of the equator, the sunrise at the solstices is going to be pretty dramatic. It's going to look like the sun's almost rising completely in the north or so close to the south that it kind of throws you off. It's kind of bizarre to think that the days are much longer the further you get away from the equator, but that's the way it works out. And here's just another depiction of that, right? Your December rays are coming from the south. Your June rays are coming from the north. And we'll use this diagram to show what the backdrop of the sun looks like throughout the year, right? As we rotate around the sun, there's a constellation that gets blocked out by the sun, but we can know that it's back there because of how we can relate it to the night sky when the sun sets. So when one says the sun is in Leo, what they mean is Leo is the constellation that's at the backdrop of the sun. This is a way that we like to measure our seasons. This is a way that we like to know what time of year it is, especially before we had our calendars and smart devices that we have now. Now, to get an idea about how important these movements were to our ancient civilizations, we can understand that the word temple has the Greek word root temp in it, or out of tempus, or if you think of temporary or tempo, temp means time, okay? So the word temple refers to time. Now, how is it that a temple measures time? Well, it measures the movement of the sun, okay? So the first example here, this is at Stonehenge, and a lot of these people line up to see this. This is at the spring or fall equinox. The sun rises right in the middle, right? Then we get all the way up to summer. And then, of course, down at winter solstice, you can see everybody's got all their jackets on. The sun rises to the furthest left of these 3 points. Now, Stonehenge isn't the only place that does this. This one's pretty fun. This is in Mexico. Pretty popular pyramid, okay? Same thing. You have this rather large group of people. You can't tell with this picture, but this is a very popular thing to do when you're down there. When the sun rises, it uses the edge of this pyramid to cast a shadow that makes it appear like this big serpent is coming from the heavens, if you will, and coming to the earth. Okay? This was often a symbol for fall, right? That great, terrible serpent would bring bad weather. It would bring more darkness than light, right? This is that serpent. We're going to talk more about that serpent later on. This is Angkor Wat. That's in the Far East, right? Completely different civilization. However, they pay attention to this solar movement as well. And they have these really elaborate structures that are going to mark out these movements, right? You've got your solstice points to the left and to the right as well. This structure here is in India. Same thing. And to many people's surprise, Egypt actually does this. So we know we have 3 pyramids in Egypt, right? The one that lines up right in the middle with the Sphinx, the sun's going to rise right behind that pyramid for the spring and fall equinox. And throughout the year, this is what the sunrise looks like. Okay? The size of the pyramids indicate the seasons. So as the sun begins to rise all the way over to the right and starts rising in line with the pyramid on the right, that marks our summer solstice. As the sun rises to the furthest pyramid to the left, the smaller one, that's going to represent a weaker sun or the winter solstice. So now as we go to Rome, this is when this stuff gets really interesting. This is St. Peter's Basilica. The most popular site here is the altar. And as you can see, it's got the sun disk, right? It's got the 12 divisions in it. This is St. Peter's chair. We'll tell his story here in a little bit. And when the Pope walks out, he carries this big sun disk, again with the 12 divisions in it. Out front of the basilica, you have this Egyptian obelisk that actually acts as a sundial. Okay, you have the time indicator on these inner circles, and as you move out, you have your seasons. Now the tip of that obelisk's shadow moves around and hits these glyphs that are in the ground and the cobblestone there. Now this is the solstice point where Gemini meets Cancer. Over here, you'll see that it's got the 2 days that correlate with the same shadow. So for example, we've got the 19th of February in Pisces, and inversely we have the 23rd of Scorpio. Now aside from the temples that are around the world that follow the sun, you have these images, and some of them are very old. This is of the Buddha, also representing the sun disk. Another one here. People are usually surprised to see the swastika on the chest of Buddha. A little history on that. The swastika is the symbol for the sun god Surya. Notice to the Hindus as well. So here's Krishna. Notice the 7 horses in front. This is the Persian Ahura Mazda. He's the sun god in Zoroastrianism. The first day of that Zoroastrian calendar is March 21st, right? This is also where the car company Mazda derives its name from. Now remember, Mazda and Chrysler are pretty close, right? And not to forget, Amun-Ra, Egyptian sun god. He carries this iron scepter, right? Now Ra has different names depending on which sun we're referring to, right? When we get down to Amun-Ra, this yellow sun, this also refers to the winter solstice sun, okay? So Amun-Ra, okay, is the sun at the winter solstice to the Egyptians. And here we can see the largest temple in the world. This is the temple of Karnak in Egypt. Notice all of these sphinxes here on each side. They actually have heads of rams on them, okay? At the winter solstice, the sun's going to rise right down the middle of this corridor over the altar at the end. And people line up to see this. Okay, this is the death place and also the birthplace of the sun, or the sun god Ra, Amun-Ra. Now in Revelation, Jesus calls himself the Amen, right? In Hebrew, sure, they say that the word Amen means I agree. But here, you know, a lot of this stuff comes straight out of Egypt. How did Egypt get to Rome? Well, if we, a little history lesson on Cleopatra and Caesar, you can look into that, and that should explain a lot of how this culture made its way over to Rome. So what is it with these religious structures, their attention to the sun, right? As well as these religious figures, their attention to the sun. You have all these monuments throughout the world, or these temples, right, that follow the sun. You see zodiac signs on the floors of cathedrals. Here we have sun disk Jesus in the middle with the zodiac wheel around him, the floor of a synagogue. It's very old. So old that the study goes back to ancient Egypt. So let's explore these connections a little bit further. And rather than looking at the connections to the world with the sun, we're actually going to look at some stories that talk about the night sky itself. This is where all this stuff gets really interesting. This is where a lot of this stuff may come to a shock or a surprise. But I assure you this is going to be worth paying attention to, and you guys are going to have a lot more information. This is going to clarify and clear up a lot of questions for you.